to races with him and like got to meet drivers and stuff like that.
Dope.
He's super knowledgeable about that stuff. And I've been to Formula One races with him too. It's just usually, especially with us living a lot in the southern United States, there's just a lot more NASCAR races going on.
100%.
But I think it's really like the engineering of the cars and things that get him like super interested.
Yeah. Fucking, that's so cool.
It was cool.
So what was your first job?
My first job was at an Outback Steakhouse.
Oh, dope. So you got right into restaurants.
Yeah, well, it was funny because I remember going... So we lived at the time in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And there wasn't a lot of like, I don't want to use the word nice restaurants, but it was, chain restaurants were kind of most of your restaurants in that area. Mm-hmm. So I remember a new Outback Steakhouse had opened and it was like, okay, let's go there to eat. And it was like a couple days before my 16th birthday. One of the managers came by the table and was chatting with us, asked us about everything because they'd only opened like 2 weeks prior.
Yeah.
And my mom was like, well, he needs a job. He turns 16 in 2 days. And the guy was like, all right, come in 2 days. So then I worked there and I continued to work there until I graduated from high school.
Oh, dope. Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah. That's cool that you say that because now when you walk into a Chili's or an Applebee's, you don't talk to the manager.
No.
So I think that those restaurants definitely had a heyday before they blew up into what they are today.
Oh, sure.
And you actually had a restaurant feel.
And I'll say this, that particular Outback, it's like that was a time where they were still making everything in-house. Like they made their mayonnaise from scratch and things like that for the burgers. And, that's not a huge deal, but I'm saying they were literally making everything from scratch. And the proprietor there was this guy named Phil Taylor who ended up, he was 29. He was like the youngest proprietor they ever had. At least in that area, and he ended up being like a regional. He was in charge of like a bunch of their restaurants. So I actually learned a lot from watching a 29-year-old that was just kind of a hustler, like have all these other people that had worked for the company that were like a lot older a lot of times. Yeah. And just seeing the way he sort of owned that place and like really pushed for it. It's like I actually that was a good example of seeing management at like a young age. And some of the mentors of mine later on, if I really think about it, some of the things I saw in them were things I saw in him first.
God damn, that's a cool point. Like, I have this thought that you never really know, like that you're learning something in the moment. Then afterwards you learn it, and like I bet you talk to that guy every day. You weren't like, this is what mentors should be, No. But years later, then you realize, and you're like, man, the answers have been in front of me all along.
Yeah. I remember being 16. I was like one of the youngest employees there. And Phil was really big into like attention to detail. Mm-hmm. And I remember one day he had made like guacamole and chips and just put it out for people in the kitchen. And I just remember eating some like on like a break and walking out. And I just remember saying like, hey, Phil, thanks. The guac's great. Really appreciate it. And he didn't say anything. He just kind of nodded. Yeah. And then like a few days later, he's like, hey, I need you to come to our all staff meeting. Normally the bussers wouldn't come.
Yeah.
Like the bussers were like 16, so a lot of times they weren't required to come to like the all staff meeting of the people that you're in school and stuff. Well, I remember going to the all staff meeting and he ended up making me the employee of the month.
Oh, dope.
But I just remember him saying to everybody, he's like, this is the only person that said thank you. And he goes, you never know. He's like, you have a small gesture. If you're the only one that does it, it means a lot to people.
Yeah.
And he goes, think about that with your customers. He's like, if you're the only one who says, how you doing today, or smiles, he goes, people get smiled at all the time. But he goes, if you're the only one that smiled at them that day, it carries weight.
Very
in
true.
The same way that if like one person out of 30 says thank you, it carries weight. He goes, so never take a small gesture for granted. And he did that. And I just remember thinking at the moment, like he wasn't getting on to anybody else. They're busy. Like he didn't expect people to say like thank you. But his point was that if you're the only one who does something that you assume other people are doing over and over again, it carries a lot of weight.
100%. That's I call it reverse customer service. Like when you talk to somebody on the phone, AT&T, whatever it is, if you use their first name over and over again, you get a lot better service from them. Because they're like, oh, like I'm not just like a person answering the phone to this guy.
Absolutely.
I'm a human being.
Absolutely. 100%.
So it definitely carries a lot of weight how you treat people, 100%. So after Outback Steakhouse, where'd you go?
So after that, I went to college in Houston.
Okay.
I went to Rice University out there, studied economics there, and then from there I went to law school at the University of Oklahoma.
Law school?
Yeah.
Holy fuck.
And
so chef was nowhere in your...
It's funny. I do remember having a conversation with my parents when I was in high school, and they're like, "What do you want to do for a living?" And I was like, "I think I want to be a chef." And I remember talking with them. They're like, "You should just move to Paris." Like they're like, if you want to be a chef, you should just move to Paris and go to like Le Cordon Bleu or something. But
that's awesome.
But I was like, I just was really fortunate as a student. Like, it just really, school came natural to me, and like standardized tests came naturally and things like that. So I just felt like I had these opportunities academically that a lot of people don't get, that they want. And it just kind of fell in my lap. So like, kind of felt almost like
obligated.
Yeah, it felt like almost disrespectful. It's like you get into these like super high-end schools, and they like want you to go, and you're like, people would kill to get into like Duke.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
And it's like I just got into it, or Rice, and I just got in, so it's like, I guess, I just remember thinking like it was almost like, it's weird. It's like at the time I thought, man, it's like disrespectful to the people that like dream of going to these schools that can't. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it's like my parents were pretty cool about like, you can do whatever you want to do. But I still think that there was, part of them that were like, no, please go do this.
Yeah, please finish at least, right?
But then when I was in school, it really was a thing of I could do whatever I wanted to do after school. But I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I think I still wanted to be a chef. But again, it was like, oh, cool, if I just take the LSAT, we'll see what happens. At least I have the option of law school, and I did well on it. So then after that, it was like, well, now I got the opportunity to go to law school. So I did that. And then... and
just killing it right now.
You say you did that like
then I just did that, bro,
Yeah. But anyway, my first summer of law school, I ended up working at a restaurant for a chef that was well known in that area. And I just ended up falling in love with it. And then...
What was the restaurant?
It was called Royal Bavaria. So it was so what had happened was there was this really wealthy man had met a woman from Oklahoma in Germany. Okay. And they moved back to Oklahoma, and this wealthy man built a restaurant that was like gorgeous, and like he said, there's no good beer in the U.S., so they literally like brewed their own beer, like
that's dope.
Had like the super sick like copper vats and things like that. So and their chef, he brought in this like really awesome chef named Andy Gemeiner, who was like a CMC from Europe, and like classic, had passed the CMC exam and like could do all these like crazy terrines and stuff, but at the same time he did classic like Bavarian food. And I remember working for this chef and just kind of liking the whole vibe and the way this guy did it. And I just remember one day he said to me, he goes, if you want to do this for a living, you could. Yeah. And that's all he said to me. And it's like, it kind of stuck with me. And then I kind of told my parents, I'm like, I think I'm going to go to culinary school after law school. And
said literally one person ever in the world.
Yeah. but ended up going to the CIA in Hyde Park.
Okay.
Which I'm not one of those people that would say, I know plenty of people that never went to culinary school that are awesome, and I know people from all different types of culinary school that were incredible chefs.
Heard.
But for me, it's like when you're leaving a career that feels pretty set as far as like you could do well, you feel like you got to like hit the ground running. So I'm like, I really do need to go to the school that has the most resources. And then I'm going to literally make the most out of this. Because at this point, I'm getting out of culinary school at like 25, 26. Yeah. So it's like I really need to be like, at a sprint by the time I did it. So CIA was great for me. But like anywhere else, if you don't try and you graduate from there, it's the same as if you don't try somewhere else and graduate. But they've got like the biggest culinary library in America. So if you're reading stuff all the time, they literally have every dining section from the New York Times ever. So I'd go there and just read one after the other. So it's like when you have resources like this and like the chefs they would bring in that you get to see cook were awesome, and it's like a lot of your instructors were real, especially in baking and pastry. You have these just incredible like master bakers. So yeah, there was a lot of resources, and I got as much as I could out of that.
Awesome. How long was the program there?
That was
2 years?
I think it was about 2 years, but there was a 6-month externship.
Gotcha. Where'd you do your externship?
At a place called Stella in New Orleans.
Okay.
It was a restaurant, very high-end restaurant in the French Quarter.
Got you.
Our local paper used to give out beans as their like rating system.
Yeah.
And there were 2 restaurants with the perfect bean score, and it was August, and then this place called Stella.
Got you. What made you choose New Orleans out of everywhere else you could have gone? You're in New York. You're right next to the city.
Sure. I mean, I'll be honest with you. It's like I literally was very... I thought I was going to New York City to work. Like, that was the plan.
Yeah.
So then externship came, and I thought, well, I don't want to do an externship in New York because I'm going to come work here after school.
Right.
So, and I had kind of growing up in places around Houston and the Louisiana side of Texas. It's like I always... I would go on vacations in New Orleans and just thought the city was like magic from a young age. So Drew, our business partner here, we went to culinary school together. And he's from Jackson, Mississippi. So New Orleans had a sort of magic for him as well. So Drew was already going to Stella to do his externship in New Orleans. And he had told me about the place. And I thought about it. I'm like, man, this is my opportunity to go live in New Orleans for 6 months.
Yeah.
So I did it. And I ended up just kind of falling in love with the place. And then August at the time, they had Gourmet Magazine back in the day.
Okay.
Now we have Bon Appetit and Food and Wine.
Yeah.
But back then they had Gourmet. And Gourmet would rate the restaurants in America. It was like the top 50 restaurants in America. And the only one that was in the southern United States at that time was like August. So I remember eating at August, and I remember reading at August, and I remember thinking to myself, I either need to go work in New York or I need to move down to New Orleans to work at August if I want to be in a southern state.
Heard.
So that's what I did.
Heard that. So at the time you get to August, is Blake there already?
He and I started... It's funny. He and I started within weeks of each other on the same station.
Okay.
So we were on the Hot App station. I had been there.
Garmager first.
Yeah, Garmager.
So you guys have been working together for... What year was that?
That would have been, 2010 maybe?
Let's see. I'm 38 now. I started August when I was 25. So that was 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Holy fuck.
Yeah.
That's like the Charlie Apple, David Sucio.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got to August, like I said, I finished culinary school, and when you graduate culinary school, you think you know something because you graduated. Yeah. So and
they tell you, you know,
you're 23 years old.
Yeah.
Like, what else are you gonna think?
Yeah.
Like, you want to think you're something. No one wants to like downplay.
Think you're nothing. Yeah.
And so then you go to a place and you're like, all right, well, I don't know as much as these people. Then you work your way up past a lot of people there. But then you go, I worked, my way to the fine dining place where I was at in Reno, thinking that I was doing something there. And I got to August, it was like techniques and things I'd never even heard of before.
Yeah.
Like never, or at least never seen.
Gotcha.
And I was just like, I'm here to work and like live here, but there are things that I don't know. But I just made up for it with a lot of work effort and coming on my days off working for free.
Gotcha.
It's like I want to learn how to butcher fish. I want to learn how to butcher meat. I want to learn how to make pasta. So on my days off, I'm working 10 hours for free to do these things. And I just kind of slowly moved past some people. But Trey was somebody that he was already on Garmager and knew some of these things. So he made me feel a little bit more comfortable with some of the techniques, like some of the hydrocolloids and things like that I had no idea even what that was. Because when I was in Reno, it was this old school French place. So that is like, they were never using anything like that. Like, they didn't even use like something as simple as like xanthan at that place. It was like, Bermonte made a la minute.
Exactly.
Super classic. So when I got to August, it was just different things. And, but, it just, for me, I was like always just comfortable with food. So I knew as long as I could like match the effort that I would get where I needed to be. Yeah. But Trey helped me in the beginning just get comfortable. Heard. And then we both got moved to the hot apps position. He was on the daytime, the lunch, and I was on night, and we kind of just piggybacked
station
off each
partners.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much a marriage.
Had each other's back.
Yeah, for sure.
And
you guys hit it off right away? Was it like...
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that was great is we both cared more about like getting the job done than anything